So thank you so much for joining us today. This webinar is on deduplicating your records, overview of decisions, process, and tools. And I'm Amelia Brunskill. I'm one of the liaison librarians here at the Library of the Health Sciences, Chicago. So just want to do a sort of general overview of what I'm going to be talking about today. I'm going to be sort of talking about sort of deduplication basics background, going to be talking about some sort of terminologies, just sort of briefly going over what duplicates are, why does it matter, why it can be hard sometimes to identify duplicates, definitions for duplicates, potential errors in the deduplication process. And then I'm going to be spending a good chunk of time on sort of tools available, sort of citation managers, and Covidence, looking at different screenshots of these different tools and how they work and function. Talking about a small study that we did within the library, comparing some of these tools, and then have time at the end for questions. And please feel free as we go to put any questions that you have in chat. Our wonderful graduate research assistant, Addie, will be paying attention to the chat as we go. And if there's something that we should maybe address in the moment, she will unmute herself and prompt me to answer the question. And if not, we'll leave it till the end and discuss it then. Okay. So first, we sort of wanted to go over some basic terminology. And partly I realized that I'm used to usually talking about duplicates with librarians, and we share a lot of sort of common vocabulary that people who aren't thinking about library things all day sometimes aren't as familiar with. So when I'm talking about metadata, I'm using it as a sort of broad term to describe the information in a database record about the publication, so such as a journal article. So the metadata could include things such as author, publication, title, year, journal title, article title, volume, page numbers, etc. All of those pieces of information would be considered metadata or data about data. The fields are the different sections of metadata in the record, such as the author or publication year or the abstract. Those are all usually separate fields with that selected piece of metadata in there. And then when I talk about a primary record, that's the record that is ultimately kept in a systematic review for screening versus the ones that are considered duplicates and removed. Because you don't want to remove all versions of the record. You want to keep one, and the one that you keep is considered the primary record. So duplicates in brief. So just to go over some basic reasons why we run into duplicates. So one article can be indexed in multiple different databases. So one article, the same article could appear in PubMed and in Embase and CINAHL and potentially in lots of other different databases. So each database can have a record for that article. However, not rather counterintuitively, the record for that article may not look the same in each database. It may look somewhat different. They don't necessarily come from one consistent source that provides all the metadata for all of the databases. So as such, the fields that are populated for an article may vary based on the database, and also the information in those fields may vary. And we're going to be coming back to this point in different ways at different times. But I think a lot of people think oh, of course, it's just going to be that same record in all of the databases. And actually, they can have differences, even though they're about the same article. So why does it matter? Deduplication. So in systematic reviews, there's going to be overlap, sometimes a lot of overlap in the records that you get from different databases, because they're drawing often, looking at the same journals, pulling out the same similar articles. So when you run your search in each of them, you're going to get a lot of overlap. So ideally, you want to avoid making decisions on the same record more than once. You don't want to have to be doing it again and again. You're looking at enough already. You don't want to also, though, inadvertently remove records that are not duplicates. You will have to document duplicates in your Prisma flowchart, so you're going to need to know the exact number of items that you've removed before screening. And deduplication by hand or manual deduplication can take a really long time, and it can be easy to make mistakes. So big picture, those are the reasons why deduplication really matters in the course of systematic reviews or scoping reviews. So I feel like the $1 million question that you're all hoping that I'm going to have a different answer for is there an easy way to make sure all and only true duplicates are flagged as duplicates? Because ideally that is what we would want, of course. And sadly, no system is perfect. You will ultimately have to decide how much manual checking of any system or person's work you feel you want to or need to do to make sure that you have correctly identified things that are duplicates and only the things that are duplicates. So why is it sometimes hard to identify duplicates? Because it's one of those things that it seems like it should be easy, but sometimes there's these unexpected quirks that come up. So as we sort of mentioned before, records for the same publication, so same like an article, can look different in different databases. So some records may have errors or issues within their metadata, including there can be typos in author names, article titles, or elsewhere. Incorrect information, such as an incorrect publication year in the record in one database, but not another. That sometimes I've seen inversion of author's last name and first name. That particularly seems to happen sometimes with non-Western names. Sometimes there's also confusion about like who should be the first author, and they put them in different orders. And sometimes there's missing information. So, the author name is missing, or the article title is missing, or just different pieces of information that ideally would be in the record aren't there, so they can't be directly compared against each other. So conversely, some records may look very similar. So same author, published in the same year, very similar article title, but be for different studies. People often, publish a lot, and their research agenda means that the specific titles look sometimes quite similar between them. So it might be easy to say, oh, it's Smith's 2017 on diabetes and nutrition. Again, it's like, yes, but it's a different study. They're different records. You/your software that you use, any tool that you use, has to review multiple fields to make sure that records are duplicates. You, of course, can't just look at the author field or the publication year or the article title. You're having to look at a combination of those. And it's easy to get a little cross-eyed at different points when you're trying to cross-check all of that information and lose track, which also relates to the last point. There are often just so many records to look at. It can be easy to accidentally skim over something and not realize that perhaps should indeed be a duplicate. So now we're sort of going to be talking about the definition of duplicate. And you'd think that there was like one perfect definition that everyone is using. And interestingly, there actually aren't. There's sort of two main approaches to what constitutes a duplicate. So when I was looking at the literature, one came up, Rathbone 2014, that a lot of other people used. And they use their definition is based on the bibliographic record, not the study. And what that means is here's, an example, is if you had a conference proceeding and then a journal article that were about the same study, those would be considered two distinct records and not duplicates of each other, even though they're providing information in the same study, there are two different bibliographic records. So similarly, under this definition, a journal article that was based on the findings for a doctoral thesis would not be considered a duplicate for the thesis, but again, two distinct bibliographic records. They're two separate publications, even if they're about the same study. So it's kind of a purist approach, I'd say, in terms of like, what is a duplicate? Or what is a distinct record? However, not everybody uses this definition. So Kwan et al. 2015, they took more of a pragmatic approach, and they based their definition on study. So they give a long definition, but they talk about all these different fields that they are looking at. So, if it had the same author, title, publication, volume number, start number, all of this information be the same. But also, you'll see specifically conference abstracts were deemed to be duplicates if it was for the same study design, sample size, and conclusion, even if the publication dates varied. So we had the conference proceeding in 2016, the article came out in 2018, but it's about the same study, it has the same conclusion, it covers all that same information. So here are the things that in the previous example, so a conference proceeding and journal article, and dissertation and journal article, these would be considered duplicates as long as they cover the same content as defined above. And just as a little note, in neither definition would two papers about different findings within the same study be counted as a duplicate. So if it's like, it's separated out in sort of part A and part B, published separately, they're talking about different information that was analyzed and different conclusions. Those are going to still be two separate things under either of these definitions. So errors in the deduplication process, this basically falls into sort of two types. So you can fail to identify and remove a duplicate, so a false negative, or you can remove a record that is not in fact a duplicate, so a false positive. So saying something is a duplicate, but actually is not. And just sort of exploring these a little bit further. In that first error, failing to identify and remove some duplicates, I've talked about sort of pros and cons, it's a slightly funny way of splitting it. But I'll say the nice thing, the pro about this is that you may well be able to flag later on that something is in fact a duplicate, especially if it falls into an article that you ultimately want to include, because you have a small number then, and you'll be able to say like, oh, okay, ended up with 20, but these two are actually the same. So actually, this is something I should have flagged as a duplicate. I can go ahead and remove that now and tag it accordingly. But however, this means that you're doing extra work in the review stage. You're reviewing more records than you need to. You're often having, at least two people reviewing it in the title and abstract review. Again, two people in the full text review. Possibly, one or more in the extraction. You're having, multiple people look at records that they don't need to look at again because someone's already looked at what should have been the primary. Also, it's possible that you might not ever flag that this error occurred, meaning that your deduplicated numbers will be higher than they should be. For the other type of error, so if you remove a record that is not in fact a duplicate, there's no real bright side to it, because unfortunately there's no point later on the process where you're going to sort of naturally correct that error. You've removed something from the process, and maybe it's something you would have wanted to ultimately include, and you're just never going to see that record again because you've taken it out of the process. However, if you try to avoid this potential error by employing a very conservative approach to deduplication, then you might have to do a lot of manual flagging of duplicates during the review process. And again, that takes more time and it slows everything down. So manual deduplication, pretty much everything in this webinar is about sort of thinking that like, this is probably not something that you want to, not the best way to handle deduplication, but I want to have a slide about it and just sort of saying, the hard thing is it's not easy, it's not fast, and it's not fun. You have to sort of decide ahead of time which fields you're going to be comparing for each record. Year, author, year, and article title would be a common set of metadata to try and review for each. And this is just a screenshot on the right of EndNote. And so here I've put all of my records in EndNote, and manual screening would me just be looking through, scrolling down the screen and removing things that are duplicates. And you'll see here, and this is not even, we're set, but based on just differences and, even things that don't matter, like capitalization, it's easy to visually think, oh, that's a difference. Oh, wait, no, that's not a difference. And sometimes it's hard to sort of flag where the differences are. And when you're trying to look here, I've ordered it by title, but we're also looking at the author over here and the journal. See, like, okay, we're going down here. This title looks the same. Oh, wait, the first author is different. But actually, maybe they've just, chosen to order the authors slightly different in this record, but it's the same. There's like there's a lot of different things to be trying to look at and paying attention to and put together when you're trying to do it visually. And also, you might not be able to do it all in one sitting. So then you need to keep track of like where you left off and how it was ordered. It's it's a process and it's not enjoyable and fun. And I've sometimes seen teams really bogged down in the deduplication process where I've talked to them sort of months after they started and they're like, oh yeah, we're still working on deduplication. I'm like, oh no, something has gone horribly wrong. So this is why, because nobody likes doing manual deduplication, a lot of tools have been created for trying to handle issues of deduplication. So citation managers like endnote, refworks, and Zotero often have some mechanism to identify and remove duplicates. Systematic review tools like Covidence also often have some mechanism to identify and sort of sequester duplicates, so you can keep track of them. Historically, librarians would usually have said that the best practice would be to use a citation manager to remove duplicates before putting the remaining records into a systematic review tool, because systematic review tools for a while weren't very good at identifying duplicates, and we didn't have a lot of confidence in it. And honestly, the systematic review tool, even creators didn't have a lot of confidence, and they'd be like, okay, no, we really recommend that you use something like endnote to find duplicates ahead of time. We might be able to find some for you, but we're not confident yet in our processes. So tools that are available, sort of specifically citation managers. So they do often have a built-in deduplication option. However, they're often not specifically designed to identify and track duplicates for the purposes of a systematic review. Sometimes they're more sort of intended to just remove extra records for someone's personal research library. So someone keeps on finding the same article and putting it in, and then being like, oh no, you already have that one in there. So it's not that they can't be used for systematic reviews, but a lot of them weren't built initially sort of for that purpose or support that as well. They often usually focus on you sort of deleting or sometimes merging records that are duplicates and may not automatically track them in a separate folder. But they each handle the process somewhat differently, and they give different options for the deduplication process. So now I'm going to show a series of screenshots. There's a lot of it made for different systematic citation managers because it makes more sense when you look at it. Okay, so here in endnote, so this is version of endnote that I have, which is endnote 20. I believe 21 is now available. So some of these may look a little bit different depending on the version that you're using. So in endnote, if you go into edit and preferences and duplicates, you can pick which fields it is comparing to flag things as duplicates. I believe that historically, at least author, year, and title were what it did as the default for checking for duplicates. But you can change them. You can say, okay, I want to use different fields to check for duplication if I want to. And there's a study that I'm going to be showing in a couple of slides that actually sort of use this process of you could sort of iterate which fields were selected to identify duplicates. But here, once you actually set that up, then you can go to the library menu and then hit find duplicates. And this is what happens, is it'll say like, okay, here are these two records. Which one should I keep? I think that these are, we want to keep one as primary, but we think these are, duplicates. And you can look and say, okay, this is the one that I want to keep, or you can skip and keep going. You can also hit cancel if you don't like to do it sort of one by one like this, which is personally not my preference. And then what happens is you'll see that the duplicate reference folder, and the ones that aren't highlighted are the ones that it's sort of saying, okay, these are the ones that I think are primary. It's usually the ones that was first ingested. And then the ones that are highlighted in gray are duplicates. And the idea being that if you look through it, any that you agree with, you just leave highlighted. Any that you don't, you would click on to unhighlight. And at the end, you would just delete all the ones that you said, okay, yep, these selected ones are actual duplicates that I want to get rid of. And I briefly mentioned this sort of article before, Bremer et al. 2016. I have a reference list at the end of the slides. But he created sort of this very sort of iterative process for changing the different fields to sort of check and find duplicates based on different selected fields that are compared for duplicates. It's interesting, it's very thorough. A lot of librarians have used it, but there's definitely sort of a learning curve, and you'll see that there's, A through G processes, and there's even actually, some additional steps even before you get to here. So it's quite a few steps and does take quite a lot of time. Moving on to refworks. Refworks also has a find duplicates function. I think it's changed quite a bit in the last year or two. They've really made it a lot more robust than it used to be. So for there, you go under tools, find duplicates, and then this is what comes up. And it has some interesting options. So it actually allows you to say, how do you want the primary record to be determined? So completeness, so the reference that has the most information available. So as I mentioned before, some records have a lot more metadata than others. Some might be quite sparse, some might have a lot. Or it could be the newest, the one you added most recently, or the oldest, the one that was added in first when you're importing the records. Under matching settings, there's references must match exactly, or there's similar. And then underneath, it has the select the fields that you would like to use, and it defaults to this title, author, and year set of options, but you can change them if you want to, and then hit this find duplicates button in the lower right-hand corner. And here, sometimes it takes a minute or two, it's sort of thinking, and then once it's available, it'll say process completed, and you hit that, and you'll get this screen, and it'll tell you how many articles in total it flagged, and of those, which are the primary and which are the duplicates. And the ones, again, that are checked, it's kind of the equivalent of that highlighting feature in EndNote. You can uncheck it if you're like, no, this actually isn't a duplicate. But if it is, you leave it checked, and at the end you would delete and get rid of all of those duplicates at once. Zotero is a little different. Zotero, it creates this duplicate items option that you can look, and it puts things in here. When you select a record, on the right-hand side, you'll have this option to merge items, so you can pick which version of the item to use as a master item or the primary record. So you could look and see if one of them, has an abstract and one of them doesn't. You might want to choose, the one with the abstract, for example. But unfortunately here, you're doing it just record by record. There's nothing where there's all of the sort of ones that aren't the primary are highlighted at once so that you can delete all of them. It seems to be handling it much more from the perspective of a sort of citation manager, sort of assuming you're just using this for, a paper that you're doing, but not a systematic review. It's still better than nothing, but it doesn't really have a bulk functionality that I'm aware of. Okay, so on the other hand, we have Covidence. So Covidence is a systematic review tool. And it's designed to help with the screening, review, and extraction stages of a systematic review. And we have an institutional subscription. And Addie's going to be putting in links in the chat. We have a lot of information on our LibGuide about it. We have a webinar, and there's also some specific details about how it handles or identifies duplicates. And that we're going to put that link in as well. So it has a deduplication tool built in, and it's not something that you even have to select. It automatically happens. So as you import your records into Covidence, it flags duplicates automatically and puts them in a separate location. There's no options for selecting how duplicates are determined. They use title, publication year, volume, and author. The first record imported is considered the primary one, and the subsequent one are considered duplicates. You can also flag items as duplicates during the review process. There is sort of a specific sort of tag that you can, or option that you can use to highlight those. So some screenshots of Covidence. So we'll see at the top, we have this 433 total duplicates removed. So I've imported all of my records, and it says, okay, 433 match our criteria for duplicates. So we've sequestered them off here, whereas the rest of them are things that you should, start the reviewing. So what happens if you click on that number, that 433 total duplicates removed? You get to this page where you can, again, sort of review and say like, okay, we have the primary reference on the left-hand side. We have what it thinks are the duplicates on the right-hand side. And if you disagree, you can click that not a duplicate button for each and any of them that you think that's the case. And those will get added back for the title and screening process, because they're saying they're distinct things that should be looked at. We'll also see across the top next to the auto mark duplicates, there's a manually marked duplicates, which is currently 0. But if we're in the title and abstract phrase, or actually the full text as well, and we come across something that we say is a duplicate, we can click on that duplicate link, and it would get added to that manually identified duplicates number. And so you could always, go back and look at those separately. So we get a lot of questions from faculty being like, well, which tool should we use? How did they compare? So for our own interest, last summer, 2 librarian colleagues and I tested 3 tools for deduplication using files from 3 previous reviews. So we had all of those records prior to deduplication still for those reviews. And we're saying like, okay, well, what would have happened if we used these tools? So we used Covidence, we used refworks using their default deduplication setting for similar records. We used endnote using their default deduplication settings. And we used the definition for duplicates, which was based on bibliographic record, not study. So more of the purist approach here. We timed sort of how long some of these processes took, because that was sort of interest to us, for uploading the files, and then running the deduplication for the time ones where that was relevant. Again, Covidence does that innately as part of the import process. And then how long did it take to sort of check for the false positives? So we looked at everything that they flagged as a duplicate and timed how long did it take us to look through that, and then also how many did we find. And in terms of the number of duplicates that were found, this is how they compared for each of the studies that we did. So each study relates, is a separate review. So I could say, review 1, review 2, review 3. So in blue is just using one of the systems. And then for refworks and endnote, we also said like, okay, well, we'll use refworks or endnote, but then we put the remaining files into Covidence, and if Covidence flags additional ones, that's what's in orange. And we'll see, using only Covidence always did better than any other single approach, but also using refworks, using both refworks and Covidence happened to be the one that caught most overall in these particular cases. In terms of false positives, mainly we didn't find many. We did find some, but even of those, many of those were ones that under the different definition, if it was based on the study definition rather than the bibliographic record, they wouldn't have been actually considered duplicates. So it's things like conference proceedings, and then a journal article, or thesis, and then journal article. There were some that would not have matched, but many of them would not have been duplicates under that less severe definition. There were no false positives using default endnote settings. Refworks plus Covidence always found most duplicates overall, as mentioned before, and Covidence, did do well. The one thing that we ran into with Covidence is the way that the duplicate records were displayed, it made it harder to visually compare them, so it took longer. So we remember sort of like how it had that column on the left and then the different ones on the right. Trying to sort of compare the different fields was really, kind of challenging, as opposed to ones like EndNote, which gave it to us in columns, so it's easier to look sort of straight down and compare records that way. So what does this indicate? Our little study, no definitive way to ensure that there's no false positives, but these were encouragingly low for all three tools. We did intentionally focus on somewhat smaller reviews for the sake of time, but these weren't tiny. The smallest one was, I think, 1,400 records. The largest one was almost 4,000 records. So not enormous number of records, but, not tiny either. And for us, it increased confidence in researchers relying on competence alone for identifying duplicates, although, again, no system is perfect. So on a related note, so should you use both a citation manager and Covidence? So I think, the positive side is you might well be using a citation manager anyway to manage your records, and you would likely catch more duplicates using both. They'll handle things in slightly different ways and catch slightly different things in the process. And having, less duplicates to look through when you're in the review process is great. So as many as you can get out ahead of it is useful. However, if you're using multiple systems, you do need to be extra careful in your record keeping, because then Covidence won't know about any duplicates that are removed before you import your records. So you're going to need to be doing more editing on the Prisma chart. So looking at that here, if we're looking at the Prisma chart, Covidence can create one for you, but it doesn't know about things that happened before content got imported. So if you use different approaches, you need to keep track, and you would need to edit that accordingly. So Covidence will only know about the duplicates it found, not the ones that, EndNote found or refworks found before. So another question that we often get some variation on is like, do you really have to check all of the items flagged as duplicates, or can you just trust the tool? And the hard thing is this really comes down to your records and also your sort of risk tolerance for the study. If you have some records with very poor or sparse metadata, you might need to be more careful. Some databases, especially things that are maybe more gray literature, they might have more sparse record keeping. They might not be as rich in terms of the metadata that they have. And when there's a lot of missing fields, you may either get a lot of more things flagged as duplicates or not flagged as duplicates that should be, because it's just not able to sort of like handle that missing data well. And so you just need to be paying attention to sort of that. If you are, manually checking, which again, it's not that it's not a good thing to do. It's just always sort of weighing the time and energy part. But if you're like, no, this is what I want to do, I really want to have someone double check everything that it's flagged as a duplicate to make sure that there's nothing in there that actually isn't. Really want to say, like, have a nice strong coffee, block of an hour or two in your calendar. Like, it's not a good thing to try and do in 15-minute chunks, especially because most of the tools don't allow you to easily put a pin in the place where you're going to be leaving off and then starting again. All right, so here are the references that I mentioned at different points during the presentation. Before you ask any questions that you have, I just wanted to mention, my contact information. I'm Amelia Brunskill. My email is abrunks2@uic.edu. A recording of this will be sent out later this week. Next week's webinar is the last in our systematic review webinar series. It's on citation searching, and we're going to be putting links in the chat to that, as well as to the evaluation link. Any feedback that you have on this webinar would be great. This is the first time I'm doing this particular one, and any feedback